It was the kind of day where the world seemed to move slower. The sun hung low, casting long shadows on the empty streets of the city, while the hum of traffic was a distant backdrop. Inside his yellow cab, Charlie Thompson tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, his eyes glazed with the monotony of his routine. Another shift, another day driving the same route, taking passengers from one corner of the city to the next. But this time, as Charlie made his way down Main Street, a figure caught his eye, a woman standing by the curb, clutching her chest as if trying to hold herself together. She looked pale, weak, her breath shallow. Charlie's heart skipped a beat as he noticed the desperation in her eyes. Without thinking, he pulled the cab over, the screech of tires breaking the quiet of the late afternoon. "You okay?" he called out, his voice laced with concern. The woman looked up, her eyes widening with a mix of surprise and relief. "I think I need help," she whispered, barely able to stand on her own. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Charlie Thompson wasn't a man who believed in fate. He had learned long ago that life had a way of knocking you down, again and again, until you had no choice but to get back up. Born and raised in the city, Charlie had lived a life that was neither remarkable nor tragic. He was just another face in the crowd, driving his taxi through the daily grind of the urban landscape, helping people get to where they needed to go. Charlie had been married once, many years ago, but life had pulled them in different directions. His wife had dreams of becoming a writer, traveling the world, while Charlie found solace in the simple things: his cab, his favorite bar, the occasional good meal. They had tried to make it work, but somewhere along the way, they had grown apart. They had parted amicably, with mutual respect but no ill will. She had her life, and he had his. In the years that followed, Charlie threw himself into his work, never really looking back. But there was always a sense of emptiness, a quiet ache in his chest that nothing seemed to fill. The people who entered his cab were fleeting. The connections he made with them were brief. He had resigned himself to being a stranger in the lives of others, someone who was good at getting people from one place to another, but never staying long enough to make a real impact. And then came that fateful day, when a woman, desperate for help, climbed into his cab, and everything changed. Her name was Sarah. She was in her mid-30s, with dark hair that cascaded around her face, now disheveled from the strain she was under. When Charlie had first seen her, she looked as if she were struggling to breathe, her hand clutching at her chest as though she couldn't quite catch her breath. She had asked for a ride to the hospital, but Charlie could tell something was wrong. It wasn't just the pain in her face, the beads of sweat on her brow. It was the way she slumped against the seat as if she didn't have the energy to sit up. He could hear the strain in her voice when she spoke, and his concern only deepened. "Are you okay?" he asked again, his tone more urgent now. "I don't know. I don't think I can make it," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a heart condition, and I didn't want to bother anyone. But now, I don't think I can get there on my own." Charlie's heart sank. This wasn't just another passenger. This was someone in real trouble. He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of not knowing if she would make it. Without thinking, he slammed his foot on the accelerator, speeding toward the nearest hospital, his heart racing along with his cab. But as he drove, Sarah's breathing grew more labored, her body more limp. She looked pale, her eyes unfocused, and Charlie knew that time was running out. He needed to get her help fast, but there was a problem. He was stuck in traffic, and the hospital seemed miles away. His panic surged. Should he take a different route? Try to find a shortcut? But the situation seemed more dire than that. Sarah was slipping away in front of him. "Just hold on, Sarah," Charlie said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Please hold on. We're almost there." As the minutes ticked by, Charlie could feel the tension in the cab rising. He glanced at Sarah in the rearview mirror, watching as her face grew paler with each passing second. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, and her hand was still clutching her chest as if she were trying to hold herself together. Charlie's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing. He needed help, and fast. At that moment, he saw a familiar building, a fire station just a few blocks ahead. He made a snap decision. There wasn't time to wait for an ambulance. He couldn't let her die in his cab. Without thinking, he swerved into the parking lot, his heart pounding in his chest. He leaped out of the cab before it had even come to a complete stop. "Help!" he shouted, rushing into the station, his voice desperate. "I need help. There's a woman in my cab. She's having a heart attack. Please." The firefighters, who had been lounging around and laughing just moments before, sprang into action. One of them ran to the cab, while another called for medical backup. Charlie stood there, helpless, watching as they worked to stabilize Sarah, his pulse racing. It felt like hours, though only minutes had passed. The team worked quickly, moving Sarah from the cab to the ambulance, her body still limp but showing signs of life. "Is she going to be okay?" Charlie asked, his voice trembling. "We've got her," the paramedic said, offering him a reassuring smile. "She's in good hands now." Charlie's legs nearly gave out as he sank back onto the pavement, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. He had saved her. He had done the right thing. And for the first time in a long time, Charlie felt something stir inside him, something like hope. Charlie stood by the ambulance, watching as Sarah was loaded inside. The paramedics worked quickly, but Charlie couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that clung to the air. He had no idea if Sarah would make it, but he couldn't leave. Not now. "Charlie," a voice called out behind him. He turned to see Sarah's face in the back of the ambulance, her eyes wide, filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "You saved my life." The words hit Charlie like a wave. He felt his breath catch in his chest, his hands trembling. He had done something that mattered. For the first time in years, Charlie felt like he had made a difference. "I just did what anyone would have done," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "No," Sarah whispered, shaking her head. "You did more than that. You didn't give up on me. You didn't leave me alone." Charlie's eyes filled with tears. He had spent so much of his life feeling invisible, unnoticed. But in that moment, he realized that the small acts of kindness mattered more than anything. They were what made life worth living. A few days later, Charlie received a call from the hospital. Sarah had made a full recovery. She was back home, surrounded by her family, and she wanted to thank him. He couldn't believe it. After everything, she was okay. Charlie smiled, a warm feeling spreading through him. It was strange to think that such a small act, pulling over to help a stranger, had led to something so profound. Sarah had been a person in need, but in helping her, Charlie had found something too, a purpose. Over the weeks that followed, Sarah and Charlie stayed in touch. They talked on the phone, and occasionally, Sarah even stopped by Charlie's taxi to thank him again. It became clear that their connection was something special, not bound by chance, but by an unspoken understanding. Sometimes, a single act of kindness could change the entire trajectory of a life. And in that small moment, Charlie had given more than just a ride. He had given Sarah hope, and in return, she had given him a renewed sense of purpose. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing for more powerful, life-changing stories like this one. Share it with someone you know who might need a reminder that kindness has the power to change lives. Just one small act of compassion can have a lasting impact, and you have the power to make someone's day, just like Charlie did for Sarah. We're all capable of creating these moments that leave a lasting imprint. What will your act of kindness be today? Let us know in the comments below.